Welcome back to Liz and Sandro's Marketing Podcast. We're the podcast that helps your small business grow through all things digital marketing, including web design, SEO, email marketing, so much more. Today, Liz and I are going to discuss the pros and cons of Squarespace.
Yeah, we did a comparison episode of, I believe it was Wix, Weebly, not Squeebly, Wix, Weebly, and Squarespace a couple months ago. And I thought it'd be good to do a deep dive on Squarespace.
And why is that? Do you have a new client with the Squarespace or what's going on?
We have done some work on Squarespace. And if you are a regular listener of the show, you know that ultimately I've gone all in on WordPress and the Divi Builder. I just love it so much. So yeah, working on Squarespace has been a challenge.
Is that your first time working with Squarespace?
Well, so our original podcast website was on Squarespace, and so I did play around with that one, but we're now on WordPress, and I'm thrilled about it. So let me jump in with some of the cons, so Sandro can finish with the pros and end the episode on a high note.
Some of the challenges.
Yes. So couple issues I have with Squarespace. The biggest one being, there's no staging site. And that really irks me because now we're live, and if I want to play around with some things, you're playing around with the live site, and that just always makes me really nervous. And yeah, you can set up some hidden pages, and the client can view them, and from that sense, you can get around it. But I'm just a huge fan of having a staging site and a live site. A little bit more imperative when you do have WordPress and plugins need updated. You definitely want your testing area to work through all of that. But yeah, no staging site. The other thing that I don't love, and this is specifically during the building process, it's really hard to see how it's going to look on tablet and mobile. And they have the little drop down at the top of the screen where you can click mobile or tablet, and it shrinks down for you, and you can kind of get a sense of what it's going to look like, but it's just not the same as being able to see it in an environment that really demonstrates the responsiveness and the functionality. So that was really, really irking me.
Which Divi does.
Well, that's not a specific feature of Divi per se. That's more of a WordPress feature, and I guess and how we we have a staging environment that functions just as it will in the live environment. Now with this particular site that we just launched, I'm actually really happy with how it looks on mobile, generally speaking. So it worked out okay, but it's frustrating. Like I feel like you're launching something and you don't know exactly how it's going to perform on mobile. That always makes me a little nervous. My second con would be the limited ability to edit various SEO elements for the site. And if you do a little digging, you find out that, well, first of all, Squarespace has different templates that are grouped among families. And these different families have different capabilities. And some of these templates, you can't, I think the one we actually chose, it says, no description edits available. Like we just can't even do what I would typically do for SEO for a site. So that's incredibly frustrating. And, I would really, if you're a site that wants to be well optimized and put yourself out there, I would be very cautious about what template you choose on Squarespace.
Yeah, unfortunately, that does limit you. And you can only use their templates. You can't code a whole new website on Squarespace, correct?
Correct. My third con has to do with the interface and the different things you need to do to get in and add sections, move things around. It's just not intuitive. And I feel like I have to move my mouse in the exact right location to be able to see, the manage sections, to see the manage sections and drag and drop. And sometimes you want to get into a site and make a quick change. And if you have to spend 30 seconds hovering your mouse, in a certain location, it just gets frustrating. And as I was doing some research for this episode to see what other people have said, that was a con that's out there. It's that the interface and the building process is not all that intuitive. So
yes, I have heard people complain about where they have to move their mouse to create a new block or to move a block or to move it kind of halfway over. And I have experienced that too. So to be fair, all of your challenges, all the things you're finding challenging about Squarespace,
they're legitimate.
Are legit.
Good.
Yes. However, on the flip side, some of the pros to Squarespace, and I've built at least a half dozen. They have beautiful templates. Out of all the Wix, Weebly, and Squarespace, they have the most beautiful templates there.
Yeah, you can end up with a site that doesn't look like it was built by a 12-year-old if you use Squarespace. Wix, Weebly, it can be a little suspect.
Big time. So they do have some beautiful templates. And for that, they are the most expensive of those three, I believe, per month. But some of the other pros are, you don't have to pay for hosting.
Right, which we've talked at length about. And I can't really speak to Squarespace hosting.
It seems pretty good. It's not the fastest. It's not your $60, $50 a month WordPress hosting, but it's not slow either. And to the best of my knowledge, they rarely go down, if ever. So their uptime is pretty great. Next, they do backups. It is pretty much backed up automatically. So your website's backed up. However, that could be a con also because we back up a lot of our sites to third-party things. Like with WordPress, you can even back up to your Dropbox, a free Dropbox account. So just in case the host goes down, then even your backup will go down. So that would be bad if Squarespace went down, your backup would be down. And there's no way to back up to a third party, unfortunately.
And that, some of the things you just rattled off in terms of like security, backups, if you have a WordPress site, you have to take ownership of that or delegate it to someone that you trust. So it is nice that Squarespace does that for you.
Correct. It also includes a domain. So the domain is included and it's secure. So it's HTTPS. You don't have to fiddle around with it. Everything's set up correctly. The SEO has gotten so much better from when I started. I believe I started with Squarespace 5.0. I think they're up to 7.0, maybe even 8.0. It is a lot better now. There's so much more you can adjust, you can change. They used to default to these things and you couldn't change them at all. I know some templates, I think they're older templates that you cannot change the title tags, just like Liz mentioned. But it does seem that everything new that's coming out from them is legitimately editable.
So they're moving towards becoming more SEO friendly.
Yes.
That's good.
If you look at their message boards from 2 years ago, lots of SEOs were complaining, why can't I change this? Why am I stuck with this? This is horrible, things like that. So, and they listened, and they've really made some good changes towards that front.
Actually, while you were talking, a pro just popped into my head. I know, right? I will say that their help section is awesome. There were a couple times where I had some questions and it took 2 seconds to find the answer. So that I do appreciate that. The other thing I was going to say was I find that Squarespace websites, after a while, they all kind of look the same. And being in web development, I notice these things. I'm sure the typical consumer pays no attention, but I feel like, I'm looking, as I'm looking out and about on the internet, I'm kind of like, oh, that's clearly a Squarespace template. Oh, there's another one. You start to see them after a while. And I think they're great for certain businesses and certain industries, but some, depending on your product or services, it may not work.
Correct. And if you happen to be in Northeast Ohio looking up restaurants, I will guarantee you at least 2/3 of the websites for restaurants you look up are all built on Squarespace. And after a while, you start to realize, oh, this is a Squarespace site. Oh, this is a Squarespace site. And yeah, they're beautiful, but you're right. They are kind of cookie cutter in some ways, in many ways. And one of the things I saw on Twitter today, there was a big talk at MozCon that you don't even need a website anymore. Google is your website. It's like...
Well, you could definitely make that argument. We have only scratched the surface in terms, like talking on this podcast about all the different tools that Google offers and ways that you can improve your visibility. We've talked about the big ones, Google My Business and questions, and we've talked about Google Sites, but there's so much more. And yeah, you really kind of have to ask yourself with the rise of no-click searches, how much effort and energy do you really need to be putting into a website?
The person today on Twitter was saying the only reason to build a website is so that Google will read it, repurpose it, and display that to people. So
there you go.
Is that an episode all by itself?
I do think that is an entire episode. Yeah. So let me take a look at that tweet that you saw, and we can probably do a whole episode on this.
Finally, one other pro to Squarespace is you don't have to worry about plugins. You don't have to worry about updating plugins. Will this plugin break? Everything that's on Squarespace was approved or made by Squarespace, and you just know it'll work. So you don't have to worry, and you don't have to update things or go in there and pay people to update, or it's just going to work. So overall, I think the bottom line is, while it's less flexible, it's basically simplicity for all the people that don't want the WordPress baggage or the coding baggage, or there's no CSS areas really there to code. So you get the simplicity, you get the beauty, you get the ease. You can probably knock a site out. If you've got 4 or 5 great pictures, you can knock a site out. And some good content, you can probably knock a site out in a day or 2, to be honest with you.
Probably, yeah.
Yeah.
And I'm glad you mentioned pictures, by the way, because this site that we just launched, it is all about the photography. And the client we work with, she invested in some stunning photography of her, to accurately communicate, what it is she brings to the table. So that's why I think the site turned out so well. Of course, I will say that also could have been achieved in WordPress, but whatever.
So you're basically trading in simplicity for flexibility, or for customization, for true customization that you can in WordPress. But that's okay. Sometimes you just want a simple website, and knock it out there. So that'll do it for us. If you have any questions, please shoot them our way. Squarespace questions or WordPress questions. We'll give you a shout out and a link to your site. You'll also find us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And if you like what you hear, we'd love a review. You'll find us on iTunes and Google Podcasts. Thanks again for joining us. We'll see you next time.